working with them. He actually, one of the first things he did when he came here was give them their first grant to help them get started on their now, world-class robotics company. And Andrea Tomaz from Diligent Robotics, who also really helped encourage through their growth. There's lots more than just robots, but it's always fun to bring out the robots. And Walker Druitt, who from New Breaks, who is one of the most successful startups that took our class that we taught at UT together, and Joseph Kopser, who also was with Ride Scout at the time that was what he was working on at the time that Joseph came, at the time that Bob came, and has been involved in so many different ways in a lot of different activities that we've done with Bob. And finally, Sriram Vishwanath, often quoted by me as the most entrepreneurial professor at UT, and currently CEO of GenXCom. Are you still CEO of GenXCom? Most recently, CEO of GenXCom, after successfully finding someone else to be. That was not the plan originally. So finding out someone else to be the CEO. So anyway, we heard some really great stories from all of them about all the incredible impact that Bob's had on them in the time that he's been here. So before we jump into Bob, as we all know, is so often the case, certainly with me and others, that many times when someone like us gets a lot of attention, there's often other incredible people involved too. And Bob, is no surprise, has a pretty incredible family. I'm disappointed that his amazing wife, Robin, couldn't be here with us tonight. Where's Robin? And tell us a little bit first about how incredible she is, because she's pretty amazing.
Robin is incredibly amazing. She heads the Nutrition Institute at the University of Texas, and right now she's on her way to Montreal to go to a conference. And I came back yesterday. She took care of the dogs while I was in California. Now I'm taking care of the dogs while she's in Montreal. Most of our scheduling is around the dogs.
The dogs.
Yeah, you seem to have a dog here too.
Scheduling's easier for me. I just take her everywhere, but yeah. Well, yeah, Robin really is amazing. In addition to those things he said, she also runs, I don't know what they're called, 100-mile marathon, incredible things.
250
across the desert with no water, just insane feats of mental and physical achievement, as well as writing books and producing films and doing all kinds of amazing things. So no surprise as well. And then you also have 2 children and a new grandchild.
Yes, I have a picture of my granddaughter.
Of your grandchild, Anna?
Where is my cell phone anyway? Have I lost my cell phone? I've lost my cell phone.
There's an app for that. We'll find it.
It's in my car.
All right, we'll find it.
Anyway, we have 2 kids, Julia, Max. They're both now married. We got Julia married off a couple weeks ago, and Max has moved to Rio de Janeiro, and he has our granddaughter and his Anna in his possession.
Anna. So that means you're going to be visiting Rio de Janeiro.
Yeah, tough duty.
Frequently, yes. It's nice. I've been there. Great. Well, and you mentioned briefly we're working on getting Julia maybe come down this way to Austin.
Yeah, she and her groom are considering moving here.
We'll keep you here. We'll take it. All right, awesome. Well, yeah, it is I've had the pleasure of getting to know many of the Metcalfes, and no surprise, but awesomeness runs in the family. So we heard at the beginning they played the video of you talking about Metcalfe's Law, and so those of you may have seen we have T-shirts made for the occasion. I'm wearing one right now. It's got a networked gear on the front with lots of nodes all interconnected, and on the back it says Metcalfe's Law, the network effect, sell more Ethernet cards. So you kind of gave the brief version up there, but yeah, what is real quickly again? What is Metcalfe's Law?
So in 1982, we were selling Ethernet to IBM personal computers. The trouble was there weren't any IBM personal computers, so we had to find people who had 2 or 3 of them and sell them a kit, a trial kit, a 3-node network. Imagine 3 PCs and a card plugging into each of them, and then a little cable running among them. And with this kit, you could share a printer among all 3 PCs. You could share a disk among all 3 PCs, and you could send email to all 3 PCs. And we sold these, and people bought them in large quantities. But then they all reached the same conclusion, which is even though it did exactly what we promised, it was not useful. So we had to, and I was head of sales and marketing at that time, so I thought deep thoughts and made a slide. The slide basically said the cost of your network goes up linearly, but the value of it goes up as the square. So the reason that your networks are not useful is that they're too small. And the remedy for that is to buy more of our products. And they did. And it turned out that the network,
This worked.
It worked. And so we went public on that basis alone.
So if
the
the
question
question
is,
is buying your product, you just have to buy more.
buy more. So the question arose whether when I made that slide, whether I was lying or not. Because I was, after all, head of sales and marketing. And the answer is I was not lying. I had worked at Xerox Research, which allowed us to go out 10 years into the future to build an internet and then come back into the past, into the present. So I knew that their networks would be valuable because I had seen them in the future. So no, I was not lying.
Not lying. And so the sales pitch worked. What's it mean? What's it like to have a law named after you? Like, does it feel like a fundamental law to you? Like, knowing you made it up as a way to go sell the cards, but in hindsight, having it be applied to like social networks and fax machines and so many other things that are, pretty impactful. And
well, the law has been around for 20, 30 years, and so every single professor or grad student who's thought about network effects has attacked my law. And so it's my duty to defend it. I do not plan to revise it. I did. It was only recently that we tested the validity of the law, and I matched in a paper I wrote that was peer-reviewed that showed that the first 10 years of Facebook were predicted by Metcalfe's law. That is, the revenue, which was my surrogate for value, grew as the square of the monthly average users. And I rest my case.
There's the proof. Well, so you're known for many, many different things, and you've done a lot of things. You've had so many careers. But the thing you're probably most well known for is being the inventor. You'll often say co-inventor, because of course there were some other people really involved as well, but of Ethernet. So, I mean, I know Ethernet, and I think of like an Ethernet cable, and for Cat 5, Cat 6, Cat whatever 8 they're on now. How important, like, when people, like, Al Gore invented the internet, like, what did you invent? Like, how important is Ethernet in the grand scheme of all this? Like, how big of the puzzle is Ethernet? Like, is it the internet?
Ethernet is the plumbing of the internet.
What's that
So
mean?
all the unicorn billionaires are up here at level 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and 2 and 1. This is where Ethernet is in the grand scheme of things, and it carries the traffic. And you left out Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi's original name was wireless Ethernet, and in 1999 it was renamed. So when we first built the Ethernet in 1973, we wanted it to be wireless. The trouble was, in 1973, the modems for a radio were bigger than the PC. So we chose coaxial cable back then, and we didn't call it coaxnet, we called it Ethernet because we expected that sometime in the future other media would be employed, for example, radio. And in the mid-90s, the chips came and Wi-Fi took off. So there's wired and wireless Ethernet out there, and it's the plumbing of the internet.
Kind of like to talk about like different layers of crypto, right? There's like different layers of the protocol, Bitcoin, Ethernet being the kind of the lower layers versus other layers built on top. Is Ethernet, like, is it the kind of thing like it's always going to be there under the layer? Like, does it ever get obsolete? Or like, is it always going to be down there somewhere underneath?
I'm going to reveal a secret. Whenever a technology emerges that's going to replace Ethernet, the marketing team has a meeting to decide what to call it. And they consider all the possibilities, and the answer is generally Ethernet. You'd be stupid to call it anything else. So as a result, Ethernet will be eternal.
It keeps evolving.
As long as people keep doing this. And that's a bit of a network effect too, the fact that Ethernet's out there. Now occasionally HP tried this. They named a technology Ethernet that wasn't really anything like Ethernet, and I attacked them on that issue, and they backed off.
Don't mess with Ethernet.
And they called their new technology 100 VG AnyLAN. You've heard of that,
right? Good naming. So obviously he's, an engineer, but a marketer too, right? I mean, coming up with you're running sales and marketing for the company at the time, coming up with this, defending your brand. So very few people do both those things. How do you think about it? Is that like different sides of your brain, or is it a continuum? Like, are you, or how do you think about being in marketing and sales versus engineering, and moving back and forth between them?
It's very unusual and very hard to take an engineer and make a salesperson out of him. And I know I've done it repeatedly, because the engineers resent the fact that salespeople get paid so much. And so several times in my career, I had to take an engineer on a sales call to show her why salespeople get paid so much. By the way, they get paid so much as long as sales is going up. If sales goes this way, then they get fired almost immediately. So it's pretty rough. So I know the difference between sales and marketing. I learned it on the job, and most people don't know the difference between sales and marketing.
I know a joke about that. Is that what you're going to say?
No, what's the joke?
Well, first you go first. What's the difference between sales and marketing?
Marketing makes the tools for sales to close business. What's your joke?
Marketing knows that they're lying.
I resemble that remark. I think my biggest accomplishment at 13 years at 3Com Corporation was 2 years where I ran sales and marketing right up to our IPO. And I had to learn sales and marketing during that 2-year period, and it was huge fun and very important work.
What do you think is the biggest thing that most engineers don't understand about sales and marketing?
Well, I think this is generally shared. People don't understand that the key to sales and marketing is listening. And so engineers think that sales and marketing people are output only, but in fact it's the input part is the part that works. That's important.
That's good advice. So why did you come to Austin?
It's been my practice to change careers every 10 years. And my wife, as you mentioned earlier, is a ultra triathlete who trains outdoors. And we were living in Boston, and she got tired of working out outdoors in the Boston winter. And she noticed I'd been a VC for 10 years, so she said, time to move. So I made up a talk called Internet, which is how energy was going to be solved with lessons learned from building the internet. And then I gave that talk 50 times, including at a bunch of universities where I arranged, as Rudy has reported, to meet the dean of engineering at each of those schools. And I pitched each of them that they needed a professor of innovation, and 5 of them reached that conclusion. And then we decided to move someplace where we had never been before, so that ruled out the coasts. And so Austin was booming, about to be booming. You had a startup.
2010.
What?
This was 2010.
2010. Yeah. And the weather here was not cold. We didn't realize that it was hot. So it was motivated by Robin's desire to move to a more simpatico environment for her.
I never used that. So, I mean, I know the story, but I'm curious even to hear your version of it. How did we meet?
How did we meet?
Yeah.
Wasn't it at the dinner at that restaurant on the lake there?
Yeah, Rudy mentioned it briefly.
But how did you weasel an invitation to that?
Rudy invited me. I got invited from Rudy, who was like the only VC I knew. Well, it was like, come to this dinner. This guy Bob Metcalfe, who I did not know, but then got to, and yeah, and all the other deans were there. I was like, wow, this is important.
Well, I'm sitting looking at a table of deans, and then there's this guy who's not a dean sitting there, and that's how I met you. And then you gave me a ride back to the hotel in your Tesla, which scared the hell out of me.
That was a good night. And yeah, and then I guess, and then how did we end up teaching a class together?
Well, you were intent on starting a class, and I was the new professor of innovation, so it fit. So I think I pitched you on letting me join you in this.
Did you hear that? I like that version.
So the computer science department had already recruited you to do that course, and I was in the engineering department, so wouldn't that make sense to have an engineer and a computer scientist work together on a course about starting companies?
I had stalked him ever since that time. I was like, when is he moving here? Like, and I was trying to, following, it was on Twitter at the time, and I was following him on Twitter, and I was trying to figure out how to get together with him, and finally, when is he gonna get here? When's he gonna get here? And he finally got here, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna get coffee with him, get him to come talk to me. And I'm like, just hoping, I don't know what was gonna happen. And we're talking, and he says, oh, maybe we should teach this class together. I was like, yes, like, of course. That was awesome. And no, I was so glad we did that. And through that, I got, obviously, I think the way I got to know you so well, in addition to
that course was called the Longhorn Startup.
It was called 3-Day Startup to begin with, actually, if you remember, the first year. And then we renamed it to Longhorn Startup. Yeah, named after, no, sorry, it was one semester startup named after 3-Day Startup.
Yeah, it wasn't a very good name.
My
My goal was to see if we could make our UT entrepreneurs as famous and supported as our athletes. And we've made some progress on that.
So I got that in my notes here as well. Why is that so important? Why would we want to celebrate our engineers like our athletes?
Well, you get what you celebrate. And if you want to have engineers and scientists be entrepreneurs, you have to celebrate that when it happens. And so a little celebration and a little instruction goes a long way.
This is part of why we're here tonight, of course. And as we've talked a little bit about this award he's receiving, this is like the year of awards. I mean, there's the Turing Award, he's got like the Ellis Island Award, there's like some other, I can't keep track of all the awards he's gotten in the past few weeks, but this is a really big one. And we were talking about it, and he talked about how he felt like there was a responsibility to accept the award, to acknowledge the award, to go talk to people about the award. Why is that?
I'm 77 years old, and I believe it is my duty to accept awards. And when I accept an award, then it becomes my duty even more so to be a role model and an articulate spokesman for the field. So getting this award is not an unalloyed thing. I was surprised, delighted, but now I'm obligated. So I've signed contractually to give talks, one of which I've given in the US, but the other one is in India and China. And so far, I've received 5 invitations from China. And so far, the State Department has ruled them out. I'm not sure.
We could get to China, that could be another topic, but let's first keep going on the celebrating and encouraging what we want. You also have a particular knack for encouraging people. Many that we heard from today. I've been teaching this. I still teach the class that we started, and it's now more than a dozen years later. And I certainly think I've learned some things and matured along the way. And very much at the beginning, it was good cop, bad cop, and I was the bad cop, and Bob was the good cop, and which was good because you can imagine if Bob said something discouraging to some 19-year-old, that would be pretty soul crushing. So fortunately, he did not tell anybody the ideas or stupid ideas or anything like that. He was very, very supportive and encouraging. And I was the one going no, that's dumb. No, that's not gonna work. No one's gonna do that. Not gonna and there was probably some good to that, to the balance. But over time, I think I've tried to become a lot more encouraging. And I've certainly respected you and other people that I see who are, and learned through that it says, a lot of things in life, it says, well, go do this. And it's everyone's yeah, go do that. And you're well, it's actually not easy to do that, or everybody would do that. The easy thing is to not be encouraging. The easy thing is to point out all problems with it, or to and I find myself in these situations, I'm have a bunch of high school kids pitching, middle school kids pitching us this week, and I'm trying to be encouraging, and it's hard. It's not easy to sit there and to do that. And some people have a special talent for it, and maybe there's practice that comes to that too, but you definitely do.
And I just touched on another secret. It's a secret that experienced entrepreneurs don't tell aspiring entrepreneurs how hard it is. Because if they knew how hard it is,
scare them off.
They wouldn't start, right? So we have to make up how easy and fun it is to start a company. I remember a famous case, though. You remember Pamela Valdez?
Of course, I see her regularly.
Yeah, she's a very successful entrepreneur, but she wasn't always. At one point, she was merely a student, and she had this idea to do a Spanish language book club for Facebook. And so I looked her in the eye and I said, are you telling me that Spanish people are not allowed to use Facebook? And she said, well, you have a good point there, Bob, but there's a cultural gap which we can fix with our software. And then she disappeared and did it. Beak.io, as it's called.
Yeah. She's down in Mexico City now, and I'm frequently down in Mexico, and so I've seen her a couple times this year, and she is very, very successful. She's doing incredibly well, and she took our class the very first year in 2011. And I meet with a lot of entrepreneurs, and they come to me, and as they might go to Bob, often kind of think I have some magic answer. We heard a story today about an entrepreneur coming to Bob with one of his co-founders in a dispute, bringing it to Bob, you decide. He's I'm not going to decide for you. But yeah, the encouragement, really goes a long way. I had that story.
So part of
thanks for the save.
A problem is understanding the difference between the people and the company. So some of us are focused on the success of the startup. And some of us, others of us, are focused on the success of the people. So the startup they're currently working on may fail, but we're working on helping them be entrepreneurs. So it's the startup versus the person. And I tended to focus on the startup rather than the person. I think you're the opposite.
Well, I think that's a little bit of the balance that we're talking about. But one of the things I've seen is just the big impact that it really does have. That believing in people really matters. That when somebody like you says to somebody, that's a pretty good idea. It actually really moves them and really has an impact. Is that what do you think about that? How has that seen? How has that changed how you do it? Because watching you has changed how I give feedback to people and how I think about the impact that I have on the students that we meet with.
I tend to identify with the entrepreneurs. I fall in love with them. It's one of the reasons I'm not such a great investor. I just love entrepreneurs and tend to encourage them. But you added enormous value by critiquing their decks. And I find it hard to critique decks. The only criticism about decks that I take to heart is I hate decks that contain an exit strategy. I think it's way early to be considering exits, but a lot of them have been taught.
Like 5-year revenue projections. And,
We're gonna do this, and we're gonna sell the company. I hate that. That's my usual critique of the deck.
So we talked about why you came to Austin, and obviously it was for the weather. How has Austin changed in the time that you've been here? It's been a little more than a decade.
It's boomed. Just look at the real estate around here. There's a lot of it. And there used to be one VC in town, just one, Austin Ventures. And that situation's changed. It's unhealthy to have one VC. It's just unhealthy. And now we have a network of them. Encouraging the VCs to syndicate. That has worked. Syndication of, for a while there, VCs begin to think they need to be the only VC in a deal so they can control it better. But that's a really bad idea. And syndication. So Austin has learned how to syndicate VC deals, even with VCs out of Austin. So that's helping. There's now a ton more VC money available here. So the valuations have gotten healthier than they were. But then there's a lot of infrastructure that's built. It's courses, parties, meetings. There's an ecosystem in place that is functioning.
How has UT changed?
What?
How has UT Austin changed?
UT Austin idea of innovation used to be its licensing office. And the licensing office, I'm exaggerating a bit, but the licensing office was lawyers and people who don't understand that time is of the essence. So one of the ways to kill a company is to negotiate with it about a license for 6 months, because they can't sustain themselves over that period. So I think the licensing office here is much better than it was 10 years ago.
Do you think UT is in a better state now? Has it really improved?
Much better.
So there's a lot more classes, opportunities, clubs, things for students.
Well, I didn't have this.
And the university is better at commercializing.
I stopped teaching entrepreneurship because everybody else was. The place.
No, I thought you were mad at me. Phew.
No. The place is crawling with entrepreneurial activity and training and you can minor in entrepreneurship now at the University of Texas. An official minor. So it's so it doesn't. I don't have to do that. So what I did is I stopped helping students start companies and began to focus on faculty starting companies, which I thought was more fruitful.
Back when we started our class, my impetus was a blog post that was written by a student at the time named Elvin Shira, who took our class that first semester. And he wrote this big blog post complaining about, hey, how come UT Austin doesn't have resources for entrepreneurs like Stanford does? And that's what caused Bruce Porter to reach out to me about starting the class. But at the time, there really were, it was like Texas Venture Labs. There was very few, which was for grad students. There were really very few resources for undergrads and for other students. And yeah, like you said, I agree, it's totally flourishing now. A lot thanks to Nick, another one of our first students, who unfortunately couldn't be here today, Nick Spiller. All right, a couple more questions. So how has Silicon Valley changed in the time that we've been here, and maybe particularly in the past few years?
I know when I arrived here,
Could you like put your mic down just a little bit? There.
when I arrived here, can you hear me now? People wanted me to hate Silicon Valley, and Boston too while I was at it. But I had been in both places and prospered there and loved all the people there, so I couldn't hate them. So my position was, the goal is to network with them, not defeat them. And that goes for Dallas and Houston too. Actually, the animosity among Dallas and Houston and Austin is much worse than between Silicon Valley and Austin. Anyway, Silicon Valley is I was there yesterday, doing just fine. The economy is scary, and I'm glad I don't own any commercial real estate, for example. But Silicon Valley has plenty of money and plenty of smart people, and it's doing fine. And we should continue to syndicate with the Silicon Valley people. Actually, it's not up to us; they will come and syndicate with us. So our entrepreneurs want that kind of input. So no, I think Silicon Valley is just fine. I prospered there for 23 years, and it's a much bigger scale now than when I was there. My company went public and raised $11 million. So that's back when.
That's like a Series A these days.
But that's back when the computer industry was nerds selling to nerds, and certainly what my company did. But now the markets are huge, and much bigger than that. So Silicon Valley has scaled along that dimension.
You're 77. You don't look a day older than 67.
I was kind of hoping you'd say 50.
What's your secret? How are you so? Where does your youthful energy come from? I said when you moved here, I mean I'm kind of competitive, and it was like, how do I keep up with Bob Metcalfe? Like I'm like thinking, like everyone's like, Josh is at everything. He's at this thing, he's at that, and I'm like, I can't keep up with Bob Metcalfe. Bob Metcalfe's at everything. Like I'm trying to you were everywhere. Like I mean, now you're divided a little bit more, but like yeah, what's your secret? Is it the switching careers every 10 years?
Yeah, I think it is. So my life strategy is to stay on the steep part of the learning curve, and that's very energizing. So when you're down here in the learning curve, that's boring because you don't know anything, and then you go up that learning curve, and up here it's boring because you know everything. So the trick is to stay right here. And so that's my answer to your secret. I try to stay on the steep part of the learning curve, and that's very energizing.
So how are you?
I'm also married to Robin, who is a triathlete, an ultra triathlete. So that contributes to health.
So how are you staying on the steep part of the curve now?
I'm starting my 6th career now. I am now a computational engineer. I'm employed as a research affiliate of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and I am currently modeling geothermal wells.
Time back into energy.
Back to energy, that's right. The problem is that to model a geothermal well, you need to know thermodynamics. I don't know any thermodynamics, so I'm now off learning thermal so that I can bring that knowledge back to my model.
I want to jump to some questions from the audience that they were submitted in advance. We asked everybody when they signed up if they had any. And Mason Hale, you remember from Swimtopia, now Teamtopia, he asked, how does the realization, I'm paraphrasing a little bit some of these, but how does the realization of AI compare to the realization of the internet? Is this like a similar kind of thing? Are we at that? Is this 1999 or 1995 or like, is
1968.
You've seen some
1968. My undergraduate thesis title was a neuron model and some of its information processing capabilities. Now, fortunately, all copies of that dissertation have been lost. But since and my advisor was Marvin Minsky, arguably the founder of
For real.
And so over the years, I've watched AI come and go.
So is this different? Is this real? Is this gonna go?
I think it is, and I think the secret is the internet. It is the previous versions of AI that
AI's on
went to scale. They ran out of data. But now the internet's there, and so the argument can be made that there's data there now, and so that will sustain AI. And so Yeah, so I'm very optimistic that things are gonna happen.
I love that. When I try to explain ChatGPT to somebody new to it or that doesn't know, and this may not be perfectly accurate, but like I like it's like you have a computer that you know an AI that you can talk to, but it's read every page on the internet. You know, like it's got all of that. So,
But unfortunately, the Magna Carta was not signed in 1066.
it's not perfect.
What?
It's not perfect. You're saying?
It's hilarious sometimes.
Yeah.
Did you know that the Magna Carta was not signed in 1066?
Apparently, according to ChatGPT.
Okay.
So another question from Mason was about all of everything being connected with IoT, with so much more internet, with devices on us. Is there any kind of like critical point we reach where suddenly like we're so connected that like something's different?
Well, my main life lesson is about the power of connectivity. Many kinds of connectivity, which the internet is only one example. And so I'm out espousing the principle that we need to use more connectivity in our system, and all over the map, like ChatGPT needs more connectivity. The neural net in there is not connected enough.
Yeah.
The brain is much more connected than these neural nets.
They just turned on a feature that lets it read web pages, and I turned it on, but I can't. It's not working for me yet. I haven't gotten it to actually work, but that like opens it up to a lot more real-time data type stuff.
But then connectivity has pathologies. And these pathologies are triggered by the onslaught of connectivity. For example, the internet's 50 years old, and 2/3 of the human race is on it already, 5 billion people. And that's given us huge amounts of connectivity that we don't have a handle yet. We're learning how to manage it. So one after another of these pathologies arise. For example, the first internet pathology was hackers. 2 high school students in Los Angeles hacked the internet in 1973. The next pathology was porno. They almost shut down the internet because it was carrying porno so well. So they passed the Communications Decency Act, which, as you know, eliminated all porno. then advertising came along, and the intelligentsia of the internet were offended that anyone would put something as crass as advertising on the internet. But of course, advertising turned out to be the principal source of funds for supporting and growing the internet. So that went away. Spam was the residual, and we don't talk about spam much anymore. But now there's this fake news thing and the associated threat of censorship and so on, and that's just the next pathology that we need to work in, and it's arisen because we have so much connectivity, we don't know what to do with it.
So pathology, almost like a virus, like a pathology, like a virus, like a problem. Yeah.
So getting fake news is a pathology, and how do we solve it? Well, I don't think we solve it by having the government filter things. And I don't think we solve it by having Facebook filter things. I think we solve it by having, I should start a company to do this, composable branded filters. So you can build, there'll be an app, you know, which you build.
On a marketplace.
What's that?
A marketplace of filters.
Yeah,
Yeah.
branded. So there could be a Josh Baer filter that I could put into my app, or a New York Times, or whatever. I think we need to be in charge of our own filters rather than. But anyway, that fake news and the associated threat of censorship needs to be solved now.
I've been thinking about that one for a while, and I've, as we've seen kind of, deep fakes and other things coming, and I actually believe that deep fakes are the savior of the news. Because what's going to become critically important is actually trusting where you're getting it from. And the primary job of the news, of a branded news channel, is going to be to only show you things that are real. And developing that trust of like, I trust them because their job is to only show me things that are real. And I think that's going to become their job, is like to figure out what the fuck is real and not show fake news, fake videos, fake whatever. And because you're not going to trust anything, you know, like, right? Like my 13-year-old's going to be able to go make a video of anything he wants, you know, like, which you can already almost do. So on that, you know, another question we had from Shaquille, I think we answered it. I'm just going to speak to it really quickly. He said, how does Metcalfe's law apply to large language models? I think we kind of heard that. Gives him more data, right? Access to more data. That's part of what's more connectivity. I don't know if this will be a one for you or not. Roger Casina asked, hear a story about working with Bob Taylor at Xerox Park. You got any Bob Taylor stories?
So Bob Taylor was the head of the ARPA computer branch that funded the beginning of the internet. Bob Taylor is a graduate of the University of Texas at Austin. He's an outstanding alum. He's passed on now, by the way. But then he became my boss at Xerox Research. Xerox wisely recruited him from ARPA to Xerox Park. And he was not a computer scientist, he was a psychologist. And what he knew how to do was run a lab, and how to recruit good people to the lab, and the rest of it.
Scott Evans, you know Scott from the UT engineering facilities, labs, I don't know what to call them, but the places where you build stuff. He asked, how do we foster a culture of innovation that gets us more Bob Metcalfes? That's my paraphrasing, but you know, how do we encourage more kids to grow up to follow this example?
I'm not sure I'm motivated to encourage that. I have a little monopoly on being Bob Metcalfe. I think role models is the key. That's sort of becoming my job. When you win these awards, you have to become a role model, and I think role models are an answer to that question. Just show people that it can be done. And it has to do with the talks you give. If the purpose of your talk is to convince people that you are smart, that is the wrong answer. You need your talks to teach people that they can do it. And here's the baby steps you have to take. There aren't grand discoveries, they're just baby steps. And you just need to know what the baby steps are. And you can succeed wonderfully.
Back to encouraging people. Well, Bob, I personally have benefited so greatly from our friendship and from your mentorship and from you being here. I can't imagine what my life would be like, what Capital Factory would be like, what Austin would be like if you hadn't come here, I don't think I would have made it at UT, first of all. No way. Like, oh my God, you know, the best air cover you can have is Bob Metcalfe. Like, it's kind of a pain in the butt to be in the administration at UT, but anything I didn't really want to deal with, I could kind of like, get away with because I was with Bob. So that was one part. But much more beyond that, you've had such a big impact on me and introducing me to so many incredible people and being a great role model for me, and I'm just so thankful that I got to meet you and got to know you. And so when I heard you were getting this award, I just couldn't think of a better person. No, I couldn't. I just was so happy to hear it. I was like, of course he should be getting that award. And I was so excited to have this opportunity to recognize you here in our community, because I know everybody here loves you so much too. So thank you. Of course, I need to get a selfie with you up here. That was to commemorate the moment. And thank you. Oh, and then next up, actually, so are we ready to? So what we have is a champagne toast, and champagne to be passed out to everybody here in honor of Dr. Metcalfe. So we'll take a minute here, and hopefully, I can't really see, but hopefully, champagne's getting passed out along to everyone. No champagne for Stormy. We're almost there. Thank you all for your help passing it out. And thank you to Sriram for helping to sponsor this champagne toast as well. Thank you so much for being able to support this. And yeah, it looks like we got it. So let us all raise a glass to Dr. Metcalfe. Congratulations. Cheers. And with that, we're just going to have a little reception. There's a bar, I believe, somewhere around here. And we'd love for all of you to all congratulate Dr. Metcalfe yourself, too. Thank you very much.